Life Audio. If you listen to one podcast this year of Get Your Brave On, this is the one, because it's the best of. Hey, it's Amanda Carroll, your host of the Get Your Brave On podcast. Ran the numbers. These are the best clips of your favorite, the top 10 most listened to podcasts of Get Your Brave On of 2022. In this podcast, you'll hear from Blessing Offer, Tasha Layton, Ben Fuller, Rachel Lampa, even some close friends of mine, Marilyn, my spiritual mentor, Brooke Lidgertwood. It all starts right now. Beginning with Blessing Offer. I love this podcast this year because he just happened to walk into the studio one day to come visit the radio station I was working for. And I said, hey, want to do a podcast? No prep, no planning. And we came up with 4 ways to not park in your pain and put your life in drive again. This is from episode number 30, my favorite moment when he shared his favorite quote and was telling the story of how he has come to peace and can now laugh about being blind.
I can tell my story about, the water gun shot to my right eye that detached my retina with joy and laughing and all this kind of stuff. But that's not to say that there were not moments where it was painful or frustrating. So I always say to people, don't think that you have to fake a happiness, because that's not real. There's this great Albert Camus quote. I'm a nerd. So Albert Camus, French philosopher, Algerian philosopher. Anyway, he says, grief carves a canyon so that joy may overflow it. So you have to let the grief be real and deep and run its course so that joy, like real joy, can come in and fill in all that space and then some. So don't confuse my laughing with a guy who's never been through grief, because only real grief can bring you that kind of joy. So I just want to tell your listeners that.
Good stuff. Okay, counting them down. The 9th most listened to episode of the Get Your Brave On podcast of 2022 was, admit to you, I was a super fan, with Hootie and the Blowfish drummer Jim Sonnefeld. Episode number 25, he talked about the gift of desperation. That moment when you just can't go on anymore and you realize you need God. That's how he got sober.
I had the gift of what we call desperation. And maybe that was your case too, where you're desperate enough to just get on your knees and say, I need you. I can't live without you. And right when we're living just in somewhat pain or a percentage of discomfort, it's easy to go by and think, I got this. But it's really that, gift of desperation, which ironically stands for GOD, is you're right. I did not start that, but it's a good way to look at it, is that when I had the gift of desperation, that's when I started to see I have a need for God. I have a need for a higher power because I'm desperate. One more day of drinking would have killed me, yet I didn't know how to stop it. So I was absolutely desperate. And what do you do with that? You pray. You do the thing you never want to do. You ask somebody for help, and that's not easy, but there are solutions there.
Time for number 8, the 8th most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year. Happens to be my personal favorite, with Ben Fuller. Episode number 14, Never Stop Telling Your Story, How to Harness the Power of Your Past for Good. That's what Ben's doing. He is bravely sharing his past of drug addiction, alcohol addiction, from the stage playing Christian music, because as he said, he believes there's power in it.
Telling your story gives permission to somebody else to tell theirs. Yes. And so this moment right now of me telling my story, and don't ever let it get old. Don't ever let it get stale, and don't ever think it's unimportant, because somebody listening right this second is feeling and hearing this and going, oh my goodness, I'm there right now. I want to change this. I want to go through. I don't understand it. Well, you know what? The beautiful part is Ben Fuller doesn't understand it either. It's the mystery of God that keeps me coming back for more. And today is 2 years, 9 months, and 1 day without alcohol, without cocaine. And shortly after that, no sex. And I'm 35 years old and celibate.
Mm-hmm.
And people looking at me like, what the heck are you doing? Well, I'm waiting on the promise of God for my wife. I'm waiting on the promise of God for the things that he's promised me. And I'm speaking these things out, and I don't understand it. I don't need to, but the mystery of God is so amazing. I don't know what he's going to do tomorrow. And do I stumble and fall? Oh, you bet. Do I lust? You bet.
Mm-hmm.
Do I struggle with self-worth, and is my voice good enough? You bet. It's as real as rain. And I struggle with that stuff every single day. And I repent and I try to move on from it. And I look to God for answers. And I tell him, I don't understand this and I'm struggling today. And like I said earlier, I'm not promised tomorrow. So I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but I just go out every single day and try to make the most of it and the best of it.
Yeah.
But by telling your story though, Amanda, telling your story gives people permission to tell theirs. And I'm lucky and grateful and chosen by God to be able to tell my story on a platform that a lot of people can hear it and tell theirs. That's why the devil hates me so much. That's why he hates you so much, is because without you, Amanda, I couldn't tell my story and have the person that needed to hear it today hear it.
Maybe that was you. And thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends, because you enabled people to hear these strategies to silence fear all day, all year long. And I'm so grateful for you. Time for the 7th most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year, with one of my favorites from For King and Country, Joel Smallbone. We talked about how to silence fear in your life, and he compared it to thinking about blue elephants. That even gave us the title, episode 13, Blue Elephants and an Aussie with Joel Smallbone.
If I tell you, hey, don't think about blue elephants, don't think about blue elephants, don't think about blue elephants, what do you think about?
I just pictured a blue elephant. And yeah,
blue elephant. Right. And so if it's like, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be fearful at all, then inevitably, you ever have that moment where you were frightened about something, and then you forgot what you were frightened about, and you went, I've got to remember what I was frightened about again. You're like, I was really upset about something and I've forgotten it. Like, I think if you don't work through it, I feel like, because a lot of people just go, well, God's not giving me a spirit of fear, which is true. And I love that verse, bit of power and love and a sound mind.
Right.
But I don't think that, he's not given us a spirit of fear. But I also don't think he's saying fear or being frightened is not part of the human experience. If he was meaning that, every single time like an angel or he showed up, what's the first thing they say? Like, hey, I'm here. Don't be terrified. Don't be afraid. Because the implication is, I know this is a part of life, but you're safe with me. And so I feel like when we feed the monster of being frightened and afraid by trying to deny it all the time, instead of move through it to courage and bravery, we actually empower the monster, because we just keep like, well, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to think about blue elephants. I'm not going to think about blue elephants. and then you end up sort of, this is a very crass way to put it, but constipate yourself in a chronic state of fear, because the point is to move through it to courage, to not stay in the spirit of fear, but to move to power and love and a sound mind.
So you pictured blue elephants too, didn't you? I know, it really works, right? I love it. I love Joel Smallbone. Okay, ready? Number 7 most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year was with a good friend of mine. She's not a celebrity, but she made the top 10. Marilyn Anaker. She's that spiritual mentor that I've needed in my life. And she's always there, always praying. And she shared her brave story in episode number 15. The brave question to ask God: Dear God, it's me. What do you want to accomplish with my life before I die? That question led her to adopt a sibling group of children from Russia. If I'd go back, I'd rename this podcast to Dear God, It's Me, Marilyn. After that book, Dear God, It's Me, Margaret. We recorded this episode in my kitchen. So this is what happened after she prayed that prayer. Maybe it's a prayer that you might want to think about saying too this time of year.
I was just talking to God and I said, God, what do you want to accomplish in my life before I die? Now, when you ask God a question, it's easy for me, it is for me to start answering it. And I've been learning to keep my mouth shut and listen. So I said, God, what would you like to accomplish in my life before I die? And I wrote that question on a piece of paper and I put it in my Bible. And I said, God, whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it. And I closed my Bible and I said, God, now my job is to listen. I asked you a question and I'll listen and wait.
It's a really good challenge. I think I'm going to pray that prayer for the end of the year right now. Feels like everything is changing in my life again, too. You got to listen to the whole story. I'll put the link to all the episodes mentioned in the show notes for you. Marilyn's a really good friend. You got to listen because I met her at a funeral of all places. Time for number 5, most listened to podcast of the year. This one was a solo episode I did. Number 26, Beating Yourself Up, 4 Ways to Feel Better Now. Because I needed it. This is a really special edition of the Get Your Brave On podcast. Wow, I'm literally getting my brave on. I set this goal to ride around the entire Lake Tahoe. I'm doing it. If I'm going to teach you how to set goals and chase them down, that means I got to do it too, right? But I failed. And this episode is about what I learned. I arrived in Tahoe with the goal of riding around the entire lake without my suitcase, and the only pair of shoes I was wearing were platform wedges. So I had to regroup, and I came up with this first way to feel better. It's my favorite in the episode, what's missing versus what is there. What do you do when you're beating yourself up because you failed at something? And how do you reframe it and feel better right now? I came up with 4 ways to do this. The first way is to get out a sheet of paper, my friend. When you're in that moment of going, I just messed up this relationship. I just messed up my job today, or I just messed up as a mom today. Help me. Get out that sheet of paper. You write down just a big line in the middle of it. You rank 2 columns. You make one of what is missing, the left side, the right side. I want you to make a column of what is there. So often we beat ourselves up because we look at our lives and we compare them to other people and we think, well, I don't have as nice of a home as that person. I don't have as much money. I don't have as a good of a relationship, or my kids are out of control. They seem perfect. But we know it's all fake, what we see online, right? So this exercise is very powerful. I had my mom do this recently. She's became a widow this year and struggling a lot with loneliness. And I'm trying to help her as much as I can. But when you make the column, what's missing and what's there, you realize you probably have a lot more in your life that is good than the stuff that is missing. Make that list. It's a great exercise at the end of the year for you to do to put everything into perspective of what you've accomplished. Number 4, most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year with Rachel Lampa. I loved this episode because she was so real and vulnerable, sharing about why she left Christian music and now how she came back. It's number 27, 4 reasons why you are perfectly loved. And what's really cool is when we recorded this podcast, she had just come back after a long hiatus, and we talked about, wouldn't it be cool if this first song back hit number 1? Over Christmas, it did. Here's us talking about it.
I am obsessed with Perfectly Loved.
Oh, thank you.
I really am. I was like, did she read my journal?
Ooh.
Some of my favorite lyrics just start off at the beginning. I mean, who said that you weren't beautiful and that you didn't belong in your own skin? Who said that you were all alone and that you were never going to find love again? This is a grown woman, Rachel Lampa, doing this. Tell me about what you experienced writing that song and what you want people to, like me, to experience as we hear it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. the reason why I get so emotional is because I'm so glad that people are finding themselves in that story, because the origination of these lyrics I wrote while I was doing prison work and jail work with women in jail.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know who knows that part of the story. And so basically up until I wrote this, until COVID, which was right when we wrote this song, I was in our local women's jail almost 5 days a week with my nonprofit that me and my family run. And it's called The Wild Ones. And so we go into the jail and we kind of run this program, but mostly we just show up and we create community and walk alongside and just say we're here. And then another part of it is the Wild Ones part is that our friend Amanda McKeon, who is Toby Mac's wife,
I know.
she teaches the Bible to the women in prison, and she teaches about the wild ones of the Bible and how Jesus was one of the wildest ones, and about finding yourself in the story somewhere in the whole this unfolding story of Jesus, and hearing these women's stories and about the things that they did and the things that they had to do, and that I will personally attest to the fact that they had to do them, and which has landed them where they are at this moment. And some are in for a long time, some are going to get out really soon. But all these stories had this thread. It was just like, I couldn't help but be just so like overwhelmed by like God's love for them in those places, in those dark places that they had to revisit to try to heal. It was like, just there were so many times where they were like, this is where I screwed up. Like, this is where I messed the whole thing up forever, for my whole life. And to be able to go from that over time, and for them to come out and be like, no, actually, I totally believe you. I believe that God loved me the whole time, and it's like, and it's back to that same thing where it's like, God loves you and you can too.
That was the line. God loves you and you can too. There's nothing you can do to lose it. There's not even anything you can do to earn it. It's just there. Very special episode. You got to listen to the whole thing. It's number 27. Again, link to all these episodes in the show notes. Counting them down. Now we're down to number 3. The third most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year. Early on in the year, number 7, Take Drastic Action. Lost, Believe in the Possibility of Victory with Brooke Lidgertwood.
You probably sung her music in church like this. And her new song, her drastic action that we're celebrating today with her.
There's honey in the rock, water in the stone.
Brooke Lidgertwood was with Hillsong Worship, and this year went out on her own. And we talked about how important that is to get to the next level in life, to take drastic action. But how do you do that and push through fear? She said you have to believe in the possibility of victory.
For me, often the drastic action is just doing what God has said when it flies in the face of all appearances of logic and reason. I think, sometimes God asks us to step out and do something, and there will be a million reasons why practically it can't work. But I was actually in church a couple of weeks ago, and the person speaking said this one. They were talking about Jonathan and his armor bearer going up against the Philistines. They were completely outnumbered, outweaponed, all of this stuff. But he said this. The person sharing the message said this one line. He said, "You have to move toward the possibility of victory." And I think that is such a word. Sometimes, even when it seems like you are completely outnumbered, outdone, if God has said it, you have to move toward the possibility of victory, because then when the victory comes about, your faith, your courage will be built, because you actually know that all you did was have to take a step and you see God do the rest. And that will embolden you when the next time for drastic action comes. You can step out with a greater portion of boldness, because you've seen God come through and deliver you before.
Something to think about, right? As you're setting your goals, your vision, your resolutions, or picking your word for 2023, whatever it is that you do, what if instead of making it wishy-washy, you believed in the possibility of victory? Almost there. Number 2, most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of 2022 with Tasha Layton. I love her. Episode number 12, Take the Power Away from Your Fears. She shared some very specific ways when you're freaking out about something, even dealing with trauma from your past, how to heal from it. It was 3 ways to heal from emotional pain. This was my favorite way. Ask yourself, where was Jesus? So Tasha shared a story about when she was a little girl and she wanted to tell her dad some exciting news and he dismissed her. And at that moment, she made this vow to herself that she wasn't worth getting to know. Tasha, what kind of effect did that have on you?
So I became impenetrable, like not vulnerable with anyone. I became the person that wouldn't be rejected in school, that wouldn't make mistakes so nobody could, say something bad about me. And I was totally not vulnerable. And so he said the next thing in the process was, where is Jesus in the room? And again, I just started bawling my eyes out because I just pictured, he said, because God stands outside of time, he was there when that thing happened to you, but he's still there. And so what does he want to say to you now? And so I began to cry because he was sitting right next to me at the table, looking at me so intently, and he wanted to hear what I had to say so much. And he was so eager to get to know me, even though he knows me because he created me. It was like this such a special moment. And in that moment, I realized where Jesus was in the room and how he actually feels about me. And so then I start to combat the lie. It's not true that I'm not worth getting to know. It's actually the very opposite is true. I am so worth getting to know. He is in love with who I am because he made me. He's so excited to hear from me. And that lie that had been in my heart, it was like I felt truth move from my head to my heart in that moment, and it just dispelled the lie. And so I went through every single circumstance in my life, every single event. That was kind of a tame one just from childhood, but you can do this with anything: sexual abuse, spiritual abuse in a church, my church wounds, like any kind of bullying, like your divorce. Like, it's like anything that you go through in life, you can invite God into this process and say, because you stand outside of time and you created time, take me back there in my memory. Take me back there in my imagination, Holy Spirit, and do your work and show me where the lie is. Show me the vow that I made and tell me your truth.
There's so much more in that episode. Check it out, number 12, Take the Power Away from Your Fears with Tasha Layton. Again, all the links to these episodes are in the show notes. And I can't believe it. We're down to number 1. I'm shocked at which one is number 1. Because there was no celebrity special guest. It was just me sharing my heart. The most listened to Get Your Brave On podcast of the year, number 5, Find Your Why. I can't figure out why. Find Your Why is number 1, except for it's just something that all of us want to know so badly. I think it meets a very deep felt need. 3 questions to find your purpose. I'm convinced that the secret to getting back on your feet after a plot twist in life is to find the one thing that motivates you more than anything else in life to rebuild. I also find it ironic that as I'm putting together this end of the year podcast and number 1 is Find Your Why, I'm having to find it again. I don't know why God does this, but he does it as a redirection on our lives. As I've lost everything again and I'm rebuilding my life again, I'm actually this time excited. It all started from a book I read when I was going through a divorce, advice from my therapist. It's a man's search for meaning. Maybe we should rewrite a version, a woman's search for meaning. There's a quote in there from a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche, and it says, "He who has a why to live can bear anyhow." So how do you find your why? How do you find the reason why you're going to push through the end of 2022 and make 2023 a better year? You answer these 3 questions. to find your purpose. What makes you come alive? Like, what is the thing that makes you so happy in the moment and not care about what anybody else thinks of you and just be like, this right here, this is a fantastic day? For me, it's been different things. During this time in my life, it was my children's laughter, knowing at that moment that we had a really good day. So do you have yours? Okay, question number 2. Why does it make you come alive? What is that reason why your heart leaps for joy when you're experiencing that moment? To me, all I wanted to do was to bring my children joy and happiness. Question number 3. How will you measure your life? Okay, this is a little bit more of a big one. Like when you get to the end and you're saying, okay, I'm going to take stock of what has gone down in my life. How are you going to measure it? Saying, I had this many moments where I was experiencing true joy, where I felt fully alive. What are those moments that would make you say, check the box, yes, and done? Again, for me, it's those moments to see joy in my children's faces and to hear joy in their voices. But for all of us, it's different. So what's your why? I'd love for you to tell me. Call my hotline. I'll put it on the next episode. It's 530-4AMANDA. And then let's go deeper for 2023. You need something more, but you're just not sure how to get it in the new year. Maybe you feel a little stuck and you need some loving support around you to help you find that why and then find your direction and set a goal this year and this time actually achieve it. This is it for you. I'd love for you to sign up for my Brave Babe 6-week course. This will help you learn to find out what thoughts are standing in the way of your future. Discover what habits and behaviors are standing in the way of you becoming a healthy, wealthy, and free woman. And learn and establish the behaviors that look like the great person that you want to become. When you sign up for this at getyourbraveon.info, the link is in the show notes. You'll get my free New Year's morning wake-up guide to start every day to stay focused, the free New Year daily planner to help you stay focused and achieve your goals, also free daily prayers, devotions, and meditations to boost your mental health and start your day, and free access to the Brave Warrior online community. Gain and give encouragement to like-minded women just like you for 2023. This program will be the one to take you through whatever plot twist you're facing, whatever thing from your past is bringing you down, to find your why and become that incredible woman and mother and partner that you've always wanted to be. So let's do this together. Sign up at getyourbraveon.info. And please share this podcast with a friend if it meant something to you. And I'd love to hear how God is using it in your life. Please remember to follow the podcast, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review, rate it and leave a review. Those mean so much to me. And so does the team at lifeaudio.com. Thank you so much for your support this year. Looking forward to amazing things in the new year with great new episodes. Check them out. Great podcast to help you build your faith. Learn how to read the Bible, to study the Bible, parenting, health, and more. It's at lifeaudio.com. And together, we can get our brave on.